Hi everyone, Eric with Baileigh Industrial, and we're looking at a router today. Specifically, we have the WR105 ATC, which is our automatic tool changer system. This has a 6-position tool change holder on it. It has a 12-horse spindle on it. This is a full production machine. Also is plumbed and ready to go with a central vac system for holding material down. We're going to go through this machine, go through some of the things that come with it, go through the controller, and hopefully answer some questions. So let's take a look at it. So as you can see, this machine is pretty much ready to go out of the box. Nothing really assembly-wise that you need to do to get this up and running. The one thing to note is that you do need to remove the shipping brackets that bolt the gantry to the table. This is just to keep that gantry from moving at all into the shipping process, so these do need to be removed. There are 4 of them, one on the front and back of the gantry and on both sides. So some of the items that come with the table, you have all your holders, your tool holders here, all 6 of them. You've got the wrench for changing the tools in those holders. You've got 8 clamps that meet for the T-slots in the table. You've got 6 different collets, 6 different collet sizes, and you got some basic tooling to kind of get you up and started in cutting. The other thing here is you've got the manuals for the controller and for the table itself as well. So what we're going to do now is kind of clean the table off, and we're going to kind of discuss the surface of this table. So now that we have the table cleaned off, there's a few things on here that we just want to point out real quick. And first thing is the track system that's on the outside perimeter of the table, and that's for your clamps that come with the machine. Now the front and the left side of the table tracks are raised, so you can actually use that as a squaring corner for your material, whereas the tracks on the right hand side of the machine are recessed and are flush with the surface. This is a vacuum system, so this comes with a vacuum pump to hold your material down in place, so you don't actually need to always use a clamping system. So as a result, it's got a replaceable seal in specific zones throughout this table. It also has a centralized plug that basically can stop that suction from even taking place in that specific zone, but also as easily is the on and off valves that you can use for every specific zone. So you can control the suction on the table where you want it and so on. So very handy to have. So we're going to do a quick walk around on this entire machine, but the first thing we want to do is power it up and kind of show you how to load the carousel with the holders and the tools in them. So the first thing we're going to do is power it up, allow the machine a second or two to boot up, and then we're going to open this front control panel here, because inside there is a dedicated button in here for the actual carousel, and that extends out that carousel and allows you to load the tools properly. Okay, so now that we have our tool carousel extended and our holders here, we're going to grab our tools, get them in our holders, and get them indexed in this carousel. So now let's take our holder, and we're going to use this device in the back corner of the table, and basically what it is, it's for you just a quick way for you to hold your tool holder while you torque down your tool in there. Pretty handy tool to have. You can put some good torque on there and make sure it's nice and tight. And at that point, the tool is loaded into the holder properly, and we can now load it into the carousel and load tool number 2. Next item on our list for the walk around on this machine is the vacuum pump itself. This is pretty much ready to go out of the box as well. You just do need to thread on this filter system that's on here. Hook your hose directly to the table. In the back, the table is already pre-plumbed and ready to go as well. There are a series of filters on the front face of the pump that do need to be cleaned out periodically, but other than that, wire it up and this thing is ready to go. So the next thing to point out on this machine is the oiler system that's mounted on the back of the gantry on the left-hand side. And what that's really meant for is it's going to oil directly to all the ways on the machine. It's going to oil everything on the X, Y, and Z. It has a time delay that you can set on it as well, so you can have it oil in intervals, and a pretty good reservoir that will sound when it runs out of fluid. so it'll let you know when it is low. So the item we have here is the main regulator for all the pneumatic functions on the table, for the carousel, for the tool change, all that whole process. Basically, pretty simple process. You have your air hooked up here coming in from your air compressor, and everything supplying all those functions. Regulator on top here, so you can regulate that flow. About 80 psi operates the whole system. This is pre-mounted on the machine and pretty much ready to go. You just got to hook your air up to it. So now we're on to the gantry on the machine, and there's a few things I want to point out on the Z-axis, and specifically the green button that's kind of on the side here all by itself. And when you depress that, that's going to allow you to drop the tool out that's in the machine at the time or in the spindle. And you can likewise put in any tool that you want as well. So that's kind of handy. The other thing is the oiler. This has a spray mist oiler built into the machine. So you can turn that oiler on or off. If you're cutting any kind of aluminum or any kind of alloy material like that, that's a real beneficial thing to have. You can have it spray a cutting fluid or oil fluid of some sort, or have it literally just spray air directly on the tool. So that is also another really handy feature to have. So now we are on to the controller on this machine. Now what we're going to go through is the manual functions of it. So we're going to go ahead and turn the machine on, give it a second or two to kind of boot up. And every time you turn the machine off and power it back on, it's going to ask to basically go back to its reference position, or also known as its home position. And that's totally normal. We're just going to hit OK in this case, and the machine's going to want to return back to its home position. First thing we're going to go over is how to move the gantry, and that's done on the Y keys, the X keys, and the keys for the Z, controlling all those axes. So if we want to move our gantry, we can do so quite easily by hitting the Y plus or Y minus, the X plus, and the X minus, and our Z minus, which would be down, and Z plus, which would be up. Right now you'll notice on the control screen it says slow in the right hand corner. We can change that by hitting the number 5 key, and you'll see it switch to high. And what that does is basically allow us to move the gantry at a higher rate of speed. Basically about twice the amount of speed that it was moved in slow. So we can traverse the table much faster that way and get it out of the way if we want to change material. And by hitting the number 5 key again, it just puts that back to slow speed. The K1 key up here is for the oiler, or for the mister. By pressing that, it's simply going to turn that oiler or mister on. So if you have oil in that oil reservoir, it's going to spray that oil. If you don't, and you're just using air, it's going to literally spray air like you hear now. And to shut that off, we can just simply hit that K1 button to shut that off. The other thing on the controller to point out is this K2 button. And basically what that is for is to operate the dust shroud that's on the spindle. By pressing that, it's going to extend the dust shroud. And by pressing it again, I can retract the shroud. There are various settings in the controller for how fast it does move and how long it does stay down when the router spindle decreases its RPM or when it increases its RPM and runs a program, and those are all adjustments that can be changed in the controller. So the next feature on the controller that I want to point out is that we can manually turn the spindle on or off. By simply pressing this button here, it'll turn our spindle on. And the right hand side of the controller, it says S off, which means spindle off. When I press this button, our spindle will ramp up to speed. In this case, 5S, which is a speed equivalent set in the controller, which we'll go over in a little bit here. If I press that button again, I can then shut that spindle off. The other thing we can do in the controller is we can affect our speeds both on the RPM of the spindle and the motion of the gantry and the speed at which it moves. And we can do these changes as it's cutting on the fly. So when we turn our spindle on, it's going to ramp up to a pre-defaulted speed in the controller, which is adjustable. If we want to change that speed as it's cutting and running a program, we can hold the shift key down and hit either the plus or the minus key here and change that speed. So if I hold shift down, and hit minus, I can affect the RPM of the spindle in specific intervals and get a different cutting result. And I can do this as it's cutting, so it's a real helpful tool. I'm going to shut the spindle off. Now the next thing I can also change as it's cutting is the speed at which the gantry moves as it cuts. And I can do that basically by doing the same function that we did for the spindle speed, but this time we're not going to hit shift, it's just simply minus, minus, and plus. And if you see here where it says 70%, that's basically the number that we're going to influence and change. And what I can do is I can hit my minus key, and you can see I'm dropping down by 10% intervals. And basically what that's affecting is my gantry speed. In this case, I'm at 40% of my operating capacity for the speed that I have set in the controller. So now the next thing we're going to look at is our gantry speed. And there's two settings specifically where you're going to adjust. One is going to be the actual move speed of the gantry when it traverses between cuts, and then the actual cutting speed of the gantry, or how fast it's going to move as it's actually cutting. So to do that, we're going to hit the menu key, which is located right here. And we're going to scroll down to Operation Parameters number 4 and hit OK. And the first one you see is the G00 speed. And that is our move speed, how fast the gantry moves between cuts. If we want to change that speed, we're going to hit OK, access that field, and just type in our speed. In this case, let's just drop it down to 20,000. And hit OK. And then hit OK one more time. And that locks in that speed. So in essence, that is our top level or our top threshold that we can move. We cannot move faster than that at this point. Now if we move down to the GXX speed by hitting the down arrow, this is our actually gantry move speed as it's cutting. So if I want to change this, I hit OK, and I can put in whatever number that is suitable for the material and the tool that I have in place. I can hit OK and then hit OK again to confirm that. And again, we're setting the top threshold of our speed. From there we can back it down in 10% intervals and get a different cut speed as it's cutting a program. So it is adjustable as well here. So another thing we're going to look at in the controller is a few things. We're going to look at how to array at the table or nest at the table, how to set a specific origin and save multiple different origins, and also how to select a specific line within your specific program that you're running to go backwards in that program in case you maybe have broken a tool or want to do a tool change. You can go backwards in your program and maintain your position. So to do that, we're going to go on our menu button and we're going to go down to Operations and hit OK. And specifically, we're going to scroll down to Array Process, and this is basically means nesting. So we can nest basic parts at the machine. Basically what we can do here is set how many rows we want, how many columns of that part we want, and the appropriate spacing between them, and it will array or nest those parts at the table. If I escape out of here and scroll down further, we also have an origin list. If I hit OK, what we can do here is we can save pre-positioned origins on the table. So if we have any kind of fixtured parts that fit specifically into a fixture and are pre-cut, we can put that jig on the table, and granted, if we put it in the same position every time, we can grab a specific origin that's saved and go right back to work on that part and not have to do a lot of unnecessary setup. So we can save all those in here. The way we would do that is find our position on our table, and all the functions actually are laid out right here on the bottom. So number 1 key would be our save button, number 2 key would be our load button, and number 3 would delete that origin. So we can load, delete them, save them, however we want, and there's 8 of them in here to choose from, and you can just scroll down through, pick the specific origin that you have pre-saved in here, select it, load it, and the gantry will move to that position, and you can start cutting your parts at that point. I'm going to hit escape again and get back to the main menu. So escape is kind of your get out of jail card, gets you back always to the main screen. So now another thing that we want to point out is if you break a tool as you're cutting a program, how do you go backwards in that program to save that part? Well, the first thing you do is you replace your tool and you would zero out that tool. But to go backwards in the program, what we'd want to do is we go to our menu button and we're going to scroll down to operations and hit OK. And then we're going to scroll down to line item number 3, which is select line. And we're going to hit OK as well. And I have a program preloaded in this controller right now, and basically what there is right now is 7,201 lines of code in this specific program. What we can do is we can enter a specific line that we want to go back to, scroll down and hit execute now by hitting OK, and the machine will back up into line 7, and we can position our tool anywhere we want on that program and save the part. So the next thing we're going to discuss on the controller is how to change a tool out of the carousel to the spindle simply by a few buttons on the controller itself. So the T2 that you see there means tool 2. So the controller knows that it has tool 2 in the spindle itself. But we're going to try to change that and grab tool 1, for instance. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our menu button and we're going to go right to local files and hit OK. And we're going to scroll down till we see T1. That's tool 1. That is the program to go and grab tool 1. That is the G-code position for that tool. So what we're going to do is hit OK. That puts a little check mark by that program. And then we're going to hit the number 1 key to confirm that. That program is loaded in the controller. Then at this point we're going to hit the run button. And our tool is going to go to the carousel and get changed out. So now tool 1 is in the spindle. So now the next function we're going to discuss is how to calibrate the tool or touch it off on the tool touch off pad. We're not setting the Z height, we're not setting the 0 for the Z height, we're simply calibrating the tool for the machine's function. And to do that, it's a pretty simple process. We grab our tool and we're going to hit shift and the number 6 key. It's going to ask us, do you want to perform this tool touch off basically, and in this case yes we do. So we're going to hit OK and the machine's going to move over and touch off on its calibration pad. The speed at which it does this calibration is adjustable, but for longer tools it's a good idea to have it run very slow like it is now so you don't damage the tool or the pad. So at that point the tool is calibrated and it's ready to be used. So now we're going to put our spoil board down on the table surface. This isn't the actual cutting material. This is our material that's going to protect our table. But the way this table is designed is to pull through or suction through the spoil board and actually pull your material down and hold it in place so you do not actually have to use any clamping of any kind. So the first thing we want to do that is remove our plugs out of all the zones that we're going to use. And then what we want to do is configure our seal in each zone so that the seal is covered completely by our spoil board. We can't have any kind of leakage anywhere in our zone because that will drastically affect how well it does draw down. The other thing we want to do even on our spoil board is get a planer bit, and we would like to face off the entire spoil board on the entire size of the table that's going to be covering, and that opens those pores up in the material and allows that suction to really draw through. And to take it even a step further, we want to tape or paint our edges of our spoil board so that we get direct suction through the top surface and we don't lose any suction out those edges. That's real important as well. At this stage of the game, you don't really want to cut any corners on the suction process and setting it up correctly, because it will really drastically affect things. You can even take it a step further from there and drill in very small holes in your spoil board to get direct suction in a specific area and even centralize it further. So we're going to get this set up. And all right, so now we got our material on the machine here on the table. This would be our spoil board in essence. We've used the rails here as our squaring corner. We reconfigured the seal in the table to hold the material down sufficiently. Now if we want to turn our suction pump actually on, we have our specific zones open for where our material is going to be held down, and everything else on the table is shut off. So we have direct suction on our actual material at this point. So now we just want to turn the suction on the machine. So if you've done all the steps correct on the sacrificial board and have the seal and everything in the correct place with the suction on, you really should not be able to get that sacrificial board up with your fingers at all. It should be really, really tight, pulling hard. So now we're going to set the machine's origin for our file. So to do that, what we want to do is position our tool in our lower left corner of our material. So I'm just going to bring the gantry forward and to the left, and I'm going to bring my tool down just a little bit and basically call that my start point where I want my file to start. So at this point, what I need to do is set a origin. So in my X and in my Y field, I have values. I need to zero those values out so that my file will start in the correct spot. And to do that, I'm just going to simply hit the XY equals 0 button. It's going to tell me that I'm going to clear those coordinates, and in this case that's okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And XY is now zeroed. So that is now an origin that we can save in our origin list and keep it. Now for the Z, what we're going to do is we're going to basically bring our Z down, and what you can do is you can do what's called the paper test, where you take a piece of paper and you slide it in between your tool and the material until it grabs, and then you know you're at a decent depth for your tool, you're at the material surface. So in this case, we're just going to bring our tool down to the material like that, and we're going to hit the Z equals 0 button, and that's going to zero out our Z, and then we're going to hit OK, and now our Z is at 0. So at this point, we're ready to go grab a file, start a program, and get cutting. So now we're going to load a file into the machine, an actual cut file that we want to cut. So first thing we're going to do is plug in our USB into the side of the console, and when we do that, it will recognize that we have a USB plugged in. If we want to access that, we can just by simply hitting OK, or we can hit escape and bypass it. There's no special sequence. You do not need to set an origin first and then grab a file. You can do it in any order you'd like. So we're going to hit OK, and at this point we are inside our USB stick, and we can now scroll through and pick an appropriate file that we'd want to run. If we want to run this file, what we would want to do is hit OK. It puts a little check mark by that file, and then we're going to hit the number 1 key to lock that in. And now at this point we have the file loaded and we're ready to cut. So now all we need to do is hit our cycle start button, and provided we have the right tool in place and our speeds and feeds are correct, the machine will start cutting. So that'll do it for the WR105 ATC. If you have any questions about this machine or any of our other products, check us out at Baileigh.com. Thanks for